just love a good laugh. A chuckle, a giggle, a ha-ha, a shriek or a snort or a howl, a roar or a snicker, a guffaw or a titter or a scream with laughter, or my new favorite, a chortle. What a great word that is, chortle. I think I'll just sit around this afternoon and chortle. I mean, how cool a word is that? I recently enjoyed reading the book Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff, who was Christ's childhood pal. In the book, Biff was the friend of Jesus Christ. Biff was the BFF, the best friend forever for Jesus. Can you imagine being the BFF for Jesus? Now, I've heard about the book over the years, but to be honest, I never read it. I assumed, and now the joke is on me, that the book would be light and fluffy, maybe funny and irreverent, but I didn't think it would really have anything of any substance in it. But oh, I was wrong. So let me set the stage for this. The author, Christopher Moore, writes this book from the perspective of Biff, who is the childhood friend of Jesus. Much of the book is focused on the 30 years of life that Jesus lived before he began his 3 years of ministry, which ended in his crucifixion. The book is funny, kind of racy, some would say blasphemous, kind of gross in some places, and it might not be for everyone. I laughed a bunch when I read the book, and yes, I chortled a whole bunch too. The book made me think of many things, one of them being how we all think about humor differently, how we all think about humor and sarcasm and cynicism differently. I like to think that I have a good sense of humor. People have given me that feedback over the years. I have to admit I've reined in my natural sense of humor in life a little more since I became a minister. But actually I have a pretty racy sense of humor. Some think my often bawdy humor comes from my 20 years in the Navy. Yes, this is true, but actually my enjoyment of the risque side of life dates back to when I was a bartender in an Irish pub. Oh, those Irish, the pints would flow and so would the language, and it was incredibly bawdy. I've had to clean up my act a good bit. As I was thinking about humor and laughter for this service, I began thinking about the spectrum of what is funny, to whom, and why. I began to think of the ranges of humor and the types of comedy. And what one person thinks is funny, another might not find funny at all. Let's just put that out there. We all have different kinds of things that we think are funny and different things we find just inappropriate. What floats my boat in comedy might fall flat for you. I found this great definition of comedy. Comedy is a literary genre and a type of dramatic work that is amusing and full of satire and tone, but mostly having a cheerful ending. The motif of this dramatic work is triumph over unpleasant circumstances by which to create comic effects, resulting in a happy or a successful conclusion. Funny or dramatic, amusing, often resulting in a dramatic and happy conclusion. Genres. Comedy has many different genres. We have everything from the clean-cut jokes to little body or humor, to political jokes and satire, to forms of sarcasm. And sarcasm sometimes can drift into cynicism. Moore, in his book about Biff, the BFF, uses the full range of humor. Not only is he funny, but he's often sarcastic and cynical and, well, some might consider blasphemous and just full of heresy. Some of my favorite parts of the book are the made-up stories of what it might be like to have been Biff, this friend of the young boy Jesus. What it might have been like for Biff as he watches his friend Jesus discover, well, that, Jesus is a little different. That even as a small boy, Jesus might have had some special powers. In one section, Moore tells a story about how Jesus and Biff, as they were little boys and they were playing in the dirt, well, Biff would clunk a lizard on the head, killing it, and Jesus would put the lizard in his mouth, bringing it back to life. Oh, you might be thinking, yeah, I know that's really yucky, but I thought it was pretty funny. I thought it was funny that some historical kid named Jesus was once a small boy, and he might be trying to figure out what these powers that he has. Bringing lizards back to life was kind of like taking his miracle ability powers out for a test drive. And then later in the book, as the crowds start to gather and Jesus was still figuring out what these powers are and all the healing things that he could do, Jesus would dance through the crowds, touching people and singing, "Now you can walk and you can see and you are cleansed and you are forgiven." Jesus was sort of drunk on all the good things that he could do for people. His disciples would say, "Stop it, Jesus, stop it. The Romans are watching you." Now, I think it's pretty funny, the thought of some young man named Jesus trying to figure out that he can perform miracles. But what one person thinks is really funny can be disgusting or offensive to another. What one person thinks is rude and crude is just the comic relief that somebody else needs. And we all have different likes and dislikes in comedy, don't we? I grew up on some of the very first female comedians like Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball and Phyllis Diller. Who are some of your favorite comedians? Go ahead and call them out. Who are your favorite comedians? Yep. Gilda Radner, yes. My daughter, yes, my daughter, yes, yeah. George Carlin. And the Smothers Brothers. Who remembers the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour? Take a look around in here. Their show ran from the 1960s, and although it only lasted for 3 years, it pushed the boundaries of political humor and satire as they invited several controversial guests on the show that made bold anti-Vietnam War statements. The Smothers Brothers were fired after just 3 seasons. And each religion or faith group has its own humor. We UUs are no different. There are many UU jokes out there, and some we would find funny, and some honestly just fall flat. I'll tell you one, which you might have already heard. How many UUs does it take to change a light bulb? It takes 8. One person to change the light bulb and a committee to get together to just talk about it. But when does humor and jokes about other religions and jokes about other groups of people or even the world become overdone? When do these jokes become overdone or hurtful or even counterproductive? Stay tuned. are the enlightened ones, aren't we? We UUs have released ourselves from the bonds and constrictions of creed and dogma. We are open-minded and open-hearted and smart, aren't we? We are just so witty and learned and progressive. We are just so enlightened. And we UU ministers, we are the enlightened of the enlightened. Oh, yeah. We have studied all the religions of the world. We create a buffet of worship for you. We provide pastoral care. We are fundraisers and CEOs, and we build new buildings. In fact, ministers can leap tall buildings in a single bound. Perhaps you detect a note of sarcasm in my voice. I can hardly say this myself without laughing about it. When I was working on the service, I was thinking, what is the role of sarcasm and cynicism in our lives? And I wondered, what is the role of cynicism and sarcasm in our religious lives? I would also ask, what is a healthy role of cynicism, sarcasm, and humor in our lives? We have talked a little bit about what humor and comedy are, but what's sarcasm? Here's a definition. Sarcasm is a form of irony in which apparent praise conceals another scornful meaning. For example, a sarcastic remark directed at a person who is consistently 15 minutes late for appointments might be something like this. Oh, you have arrived exactly on time. Sarcasm can be funny, but it's also hurtful sometimes, isn't it? Cynicism, I have learned, is almost in a class by itself, different in some ways from sarcasm and from humor. From our handy-dandy dictionary, a cynic believes that people are motivated by self-interest and are distrustful of human sincerity or integrity, as in her cynical attitude. And a cynic is concerned only with one's own interests and typically disregards accepted or appropriate standards in order to achieve them, as in a cynical manipulation of public opinion. So what a combination that humor and sarcasm and cynicism can be. Am I humorous? I think so. I hope so sometimes. Am I sarcastic? Well, you bet I am. Sometimes I do it just to be funny or witty. And I admit, sometimes I'm hurtful or I say something sarcastic just to make a point or to get a little bit of a dig in. Am I cynical? Maybe a little, but not really. But I know bunches and bunches of people who are. I really do believe in the goodness of humankind in the end. I really do believe in the goodness of humankind in the end. Now, I also believe there's a place for sarcasm and a dash of cynicism in our religious lives. I don't think we should be all Pollyanna and have some veneer of saintliness about us. But I also believe this, and this is going to make some people uncomfortable. Sometimes people, including myself, use an overdose of humor and sarcasm and cynicism to protect themselves from pain, especially when it comes to religion. Maybe we have been hurt or violated, disappointed, discouraged, or angered by experiences that we have had with different religions in the past. This may all be true, but I also see people who use sarcasm and cynicism as a way to protect themselves from pain, from exploring their own resistance to learning more about others, or maybe even staying in community with each other. I have experienced people who are so covered in their protective layer of sarcasm and cynicism that they don't really experience many aspects of life anymore, and thus have really separated themselves from the fullness and the richness that life can be. Maybe you have known people who have just covered themselves in a thick protective layer of cynicism. Maybe you have had times in your life when you have wrapped yourself in that protective layer. I know that I have. We can wrap ourselves up so tightly in our cloaks of witticism and sarcasm that we don't let anybody in. The barriers we sometimes put up for ourselves may protect us from that pain and that frustration and that sorrow. But sometimes these barriers make us less. They make us less than who we are and less of who we could be. It's hard sometimes, isn't it, to keep paralyzing cynicism at bay. You know, I've had people ask me this week how I could offer a worship service about humor and sarcasm. How could Cliff and I pick such upbeat music when thousands of children have been separated from their families and are being held in detention centers? I hear you, and I thought a lot about it. I lost a lot of sleep this week with heartache over what we're doing on American soil, and I'm a 20-year Navy veteran, and I find it abhorrent that military bases are being considered for use for detainees. How on earth could I talk to you about humor today? Actually, how can I not? How can I not remind us of the British soldiers who sang a funny song about Germany in 1940 to lift their spirits? How can I not implore us not to go down that slippery slope where we lose our hope? We must both have righteous anger and humor and take all of ourselves, all of it, and turn it into action. We must stay open and available to all of us and all of ourselves to do the work that we are called to do in the world. Does the separation of children from their families piss you off? Me too. It pisses me off a lot. And so next Saturday on 30 June from 11 to 2, there is a family separation protest outside the White House at Lafayette Square. The protest is growing in size and support, and I hope you'll consider attending. More details to follow. In these days with such a wide spectrum of emotions, I work hard on the ways that I can keep myself balanced with righteous anger and with humor. I stay balanced so I can be fully present for you and for my family and for the world. And I wish the same for you. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, which is number 311, and then let's stay standing for the benediction. be standing, and would you reach out and touch an arm or a hand or a shoulder, make some contact somehow? As we go out into the world this week, I share my favorite words from the prophet Isaiah. And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Who shall I send, and who shall go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, Lord. Here I am. Send me."